We now have the pleasure of being joined by Steve Wiseman. He is the Duke beat writer for the Raleigh News Observer. Steve, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's good to be with you guys. Looking forward to another Syracuse visit to Cameron. It's always interesting when Boeheim and Kay get together down here.
Well, before that interesting game, there was an interesting Duke game earlier this week. The Blue Devils took on Florida State, who did just come to Syracuse and beat the Orange. And Florida State beat Duke as well. What went wrong for the Blue Devils in that game that allowed Florida State to win in overtime?
Yeah, two main areas. Number one, they turned the ball over 15 times. Their season high in the game for turnovers is 17. They did that in a loss to Miami. So I think you kind of see where this trend is going. When Duke doesn't take care of the ball, especially against veteran backcourts, they seem to have a little bit of a problem. And they've been a pretty good team overall this year, taking care of the ball. But in these two situations, they turn it over too much, too many empty possessions. And it's hard to win that way. The second aspect of the loss to Florida State was offensive rebounding. Duke allowed Florida State 19 offensive rebounds, which gave them 18 extra shots. I think they had 73 and Duke had 55 for the game. So not to get too wonky with stats there, but I mean, that just kind of explains what happened. Florida State only shot like 35%, but they had so many extra chances and Duke had empty possessions. So that's kind of what it came down to. Duke's been a really good offensive team a lot this year. They've been one of the better offensive efficiency as far as KenPom. And they had a stretch early in the second half where they had trouble getting shots off and scoring. And that allowed Florida State to get a lead that Duke did overcome and force overtime, but they couldn't get the win.
Steve, when you look at the Florida State loss, you obviously addressed a lot of the things that maybe kind of went wrong. How do they rebound? How do they bounce back? And when I say rebound, I'm meaning more bounce back, not physically rebound, but what needs to change? Was there anything sort of just from a game plan issue, from an approach standpoint that really cost them, that you see getting perhaps mixed up moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, they've been good, again, offensively this year at kind of spreading teams out, five guys out from the rim, or Mark Williams down low, the 7-footer, and 4 guys out and kind of driving to the basket that way. Either driving, mostly driving and kicking is when they're at their best. Be it Banchero, Paolo Banchero, or Wendell Moore, Trevor Keels when he's healthy. They drive and find shooters, or they drive and get the ball inside, either take it to the hole or get it to Mark Williams, the 7-footer again for an easy basket in there. So, facing the zone, that's going to be a little bit different, but they weren't able to do much of that against Florida State because Florida State, was very long and athletic. They really pressured them out away from the ball, or away from on the ball, away from the basket, and didn't really allow Duke to be comfortable in their offense, which is an unusual thing this year for as much talent as Duke has. They weren't able to do that for long stretches of the game. So, I'm sure that's going to be talked about when they resume practice on Thursday here, getting ready for the game, about, finding ways to counteract some of that. Obviously, facing the zone, they're going to have, somebody in the middle of the zone, probably Banchero, I would imagine, because he's such a good passer at his size. But those will be the things they're going to have to work on going forward.
That Florida State loss, a little bit surprising, I would say, like the losses before it to Miami and Ohio State, especially the Ohio State one coming off the Gonzaga win. What has caused some of the inconsistency? Obviously, Duke's having a really good year, but it's not like they lost to Gonzaga or, a loss against the North Carolina. It's been some of these more unexpected teams that have come up and surprised the Blue Devils.
Yeah, 3 unranked teams they've lost to, right? And they beat Gonzaga, they beat Kentucky, and looked, really strong. Looked like really the best team in the country, when they won those games. And the one thing about all 3 of these losses is Duke had leads in the second half that they let get away. Now, Florida State, they were playing catch up. They led at halftime, and then they got behind. They were playing catch up. They had the lead with, at the buzzer, and Florida State tied it and sent it to overtime. Miami, they were up by 3 with 35 seconds to go, and kind of made a dumb foul, just to be to be frank. They fouled with the lead, which you never do, and that allowed Miami to get back in the game and win it. Ohio State, they were up 15 early in the second half and just went cold offensively. Didn't move the ball very well, and they shot poorly, and they kind of settled for jump shots too much, and it cost them that game. The lead frittered away, and they ended up losing. So those are the three things that occurred in those. And I know from the Ohio State loss, it was more, let's make the extra pass, try to find a better shot than settling for just a jumper. So they seem to do more of that going forward. They had some really strong games with that. It's really, the defense has pretty much always been there for Duke this year. It's been more problems on offense, again, with turnovers, maybe settling for jumpers too much. When you have big guys inside that can get higher percentage shots, those are the kind of things they really need to clean up. And they hope they've learned from these 2 January losses that'll help them down the road.
Steve, one of the things I'm very curious about, obviously the Coach K farewell tour, just how noticeably different has this year been because there is sort of that overarching theme? Does it feel like every road game, teams are rolling out the red carpet, Coach K's last trip to Coral Gables and so on and things of that nature? Or has it kind of just been business as usual?
Yeah, the only 2 road games in the ACC we've had so far was at Wake Forest, and then the other night at Florida State. And the Florida State game felt like the farewell type thing, right? They did a presentation about 2 minutes before the game started, and they made a donation to Coach K's family charity here in Durham, and encouraged all the fans to do the same thing. So there was a little, he and Leonard got together for a photo at midcourt, that kind of thing, right? Leonard Hamilton. So that really had that feel. The Wake Forest game, Coach K didn't coach yet because he was sick. So I'm told they had something maybe planned that night and then it didn't work out. I know when Georgia Tech came here, Josh Pastor told us that he had lined up for Bobby Crimmins to come be on the bench during the game. They got it approved with NCAA and compliance and all that to have an extra coach on the bench. And just kind of a throwback to the 80s, right? To the good old days of strong ACC basketball with Crimmins and K going head to head. And then Bobby Crimmins had a health issue and couldn't make it the last minute. So yes, there has been some of that, a farewell tour type stuff going on this year. And that's the stuff that you see more than anything else. And like the Florida State crowd gave him a standing ovation before the game, which, you would never have seen that ever in a road venue. In all the years I've been on the Duke beat since 2010, you've never seen him get a standing ovation in a visiting arena. So that made it different. But it is a neat situation.
It's also unique because the guy who's going to replace him is actively on his staff, still coaching under him right now, with John Shire there as one of the associate head coaches. How much attention does he get? Are people talking about Shire, or is that more kind of a push it off till next year thing?
No, he's definitely a topic of conversation and attention, like particularly the game at Wake that Coach K was sick and didn't make the trip. John Shire was the acting head coach, so it was like a little dress rehearsal for next year, right? Let's see what he can do. And then he won the game, so that helped out. And Duke has made him, he's done a lot of interviews, he's done, podcast appearances, and, he's been made available to reporters on a regular basis for us to talk to him. And they do that with assistants now and again, but this year it seems like more with Shire because his insight is more noticeable and more important given his new, role going forward. So yeah, he and Coach K has said he's already started handing some duties off to John in practice, as far as, running practice every once in a while or preparing for practice. His voice carries a little more weight than it did a year ago. And he was always an important part of the staff, right? But now, everybody on staff looks at him like, okay, you're going to be the guy next year. So what you say now matters a little bit too. Coach K still has the final say, don't get me wrong, but yeah, John is in a higher situation now than he was, for sure.
In your eyes, Steve, obviously Paolo is someone that Orange fans, I'm sure, are very worried about heading into this weekend. What makes his game so good in your eyes? What's that difference maker that sets him apart? That's a reason that he's towards the top of a lot of NBA mock drafts.
Yeah, you know, for somebody at his size to have the ball handling ability, the passing ability, um, it's just tremendous, and that's what, you know, the scouts just salivate over, right? I mean, and I know, obviously, you guys know about Carmelo Anthony, right? And I remember that Final Four in 2003, watching him. I covered that in the Superdome, and seeing somebody of his size with his shooting ability and the things he could do on the court really stood out to me. And now, you know, going forward now, I kind of think Paulo is kind of like that. Although he's a little bit bigger. He's 6'10", 250. So he can also, you know, go inside and bang with the big guys and contest shots at the rim. And then when they're contesting him, he can kind of fight through it and score and get a foul. He's that strong. So he really is comfortable anywhere on the court. And he's also been like a point center at times, right? He gets the ball coming out of a defensive stop for Duke maybe, and he brings the ball up the court. He can get them into their offense. He can run a fast break. Just all the things you want to see from a basketball player. He is a true basketball player at his size that can do anything on the court. And you know, he's got the step back three that looks like an NBA shot, right? He hit the mid range jumper. That'll be key against the zone that we're talking about here against Syracuse. So, yeah, he really, you know, there were a lot of NBA people in Florida State, at Tallahassee the other night, and there always are at Duke games, but in particular that matchup, there was a lot of scouts there, and I know they walked away pretty impressed. I think, you know, 21 points, 12 rebounds, 7 assists. He's kind of on the verge of a triple-double just about every night.
Well, perhaps one other guy that the NBA scouts are going there for is playing under the basket. He dominated Syracuse last year, and now he's really breaking out. Mark Williams has turned into a really serious player for this team. How has he improved this year from years previous?
Yeah, you know, last year, you know, as a true freshman, it's always a little bit tougher for big guys to adjust to college basketball. And he didn't have the benefit of an off season. COVID took care of that. So it took him a little bit to get going. And by the end of last year, if you remember, you mentioned what he did against Syracuse and what he did in the ACC tournament, those 2 games that Duke won before COVID ended their season. He was, you know, 23 points, 19 rebounds, as good as, you know, a big guy can be, as dominant. And, you know, we just saw a little bit of it again last Saturday against NC State when he, you know, had almost a triple double because he had 8 block shots. And that was as impressive a game as he's played this year. He hasn't been as strong a rebounder, surprisingly, as what Coach K and the staff has liked. That's improved a little bit lately. So that'll be a big important thing this Saturday and actually going forward. They need him to really help in that area. I mentioned about Duke giving up so many offensive rebounds. Well, Mark Williams can play a role in that for sure. And so he's still adjusting a little bit to the college game. I still think there's a good chance this is the last year we'll see him at the college game. I think there's no doubt that he's going to be a first round pick if he comes out. And he's kind of looking at that. His family, his sister played at Duke. She was an All-American. She's now at Elizabeth Williams. She's in the WNBA. Her number was retired by Duke women's basketball. It's up in the rafters at Cameron. So that's something Marcus look at every day when he comes in there. His sister's number is in the rafters, so he has that to look forward to. But education is important to them. They're both their parents are highly educated, and I know he wants to get his degree. I talked to him about it in the off season, but I also know that if the NBA comes, you know, it looks like it's going to be a first round pick. It's pretty much he'll go, and he's kind of ready to do that. I think he's a pretty dominant player.
For the Blue Devils this year, Steve, it's been sort of, you know, a mesh of different types of talent, whether it's, you know, star freshmen, you know, some of the more seasoned veterans, transfers. How has this group that, you know, maybe indifferent to years past isn't really, you know, led by one class in particular, this year it's a little more all over the place. How have they meshed? How has that chemistry been with kind of spanning all the levels?
Yeah, it is different because there's two grad transfers this year, right? Theo John and Bates Jones from Davidson, who came in, and you know, they are starting, 2 or 3 freshmen a lot of the time now that AJ Griffin's in the starting lineup. So the freshmen are playing a key role. But one thing they did in the offseason this year that was a little bit different was they brought in all the freshmen and the grad transfers in early June, and they put them in a dorm room not far from the athletic part of the campus, and which is not normally where newcomers would live. They usually live on the other side of campus. So they did it just for the summer, just for a few months, and kind of went through a Duke culture seminar type, learning about the program, learning about, they had ex-players come in and talk to them and kind of get them used to learning what Duke basketball is about once they got in the program. And so, and then, the veterans were around some for that. Like, there were only 4 guys back from last year's team. Wendell Moore and Joey Baker are 2 of the captains. They were back, and then Mark Williams and Jeremy Roach. But so then they were there. They came in later in June, and the team spent, the whole summer together. And also knowing that, this was Coach K's last year. He made the announcement 1st of June there. And so then they knew what they were all working toward, right? They had Coach K was there all summer instead of being on the road recruiting. John Shire and the staff went out and recruited the future classes. Coach K stayed back in Durham the whole time, didn't get involved in that because, as he said, it wouldn't be fair for him to go out and recruit a kid knowing he wasn't going to coach him. So anyway, that kind of played a role in Coach K being around the team all the time in ways he has never been before, because normally he's on the road recruiting in the summer, or he's with USA Basketball, all the stuff he's involved with. And that really helped this team become, cohesive faster than other Duke teams have had a chance to. And I think this is a time when we're going to see that show up and and impact things, because they've gone through a couple losses here. I know they met a lot and made some changes to the way they were doing things after the Miami loss, hoping that would fix everything. And obviously it didn't, because they lost to Florida State. But that's where the cohesion steps in. This is where I want to see, is this going to play a big role, a big factor? Because it should, if everything goes as they planned. If it doesn't, then it was all for naught. But they've set everything up to where it should make a difference.
You mentioned one of the freshmen starting is AJ Griffin. And of course, he has a little bit of a tie to Syracuse. His brother Alan played here last year, and his dad, of course, the Toronto Raptors coach, Adrian Griffin. What's AJ's game been like? And if you can remember some of the stuff Alan did against Duke last year, how do those two kind of compare?
Yeah, no, AJ, really, he's had a checkered injury history, right? He didn't play at all as a junior in high school. And then, he played 12 games as a junior, didn't play at all as a senior. And then he got hurt in October. He sprained his knee in practice once he got to campus. So he really had a long way to go to get back to where he could really make an impact. And it took him a while. He didn't get minutes early in the year. He kind of had to get with the flow. And boy, when he finally got going, he really looks like a lottery pick. I mean, he's Coach K said he's arguably the best shooter on the team. I would say he's the best shooter on the team, best perimeter shooter. And that's why he's getting more minutes now. He drives to the basket. He's strong. He's 6'7", 220. So again, I mentioned with like Banchero earlier, I mean, he can go inside and bang a little. I mean, his knowledge of the game, just like his brother, from his family history, right? I mean, they all know the game very well. They know it at a high level. So he's a gym rat. I mean, everybody in the program said, as he was coming back from these injuries, like he didn't ease back into things. Like he was in there. He was trying to get as much information as he could, get on the court as much as he could, work with the coaches one-on-one as much as he could to try to speed back, that process of him getting in there. And he really, peaked. His first start of the year was at Wake Forest, the game that Coach K wasn't there. And he had 22 points. He really keyed the win against the Demon Deacons. And then now since then, the last 2 games, he hasn't shot as well, frankly. His scoring has been down a little bit, and that played a factor in, them losing at Florida State. So he's got some consistency to get to, but he's a young player, and everything looks like he should be able to get that straightened out. This will be an interesting game for him. This is going to be obviously, with his family's history with Syracuse, with his brother. He'll want to play well, and he can't let that get in his head too much. He's going to have to be spot on and play strong.
So, Steve, looking at this game this weekend now, when push comes to shove, what would you say the X factor is if Syracuse wants to pull off the upset? I mean, we've seen teams sort of lay out the formula for how to do it, as you've mentioned before, with, Duke not taking care of the basketball. But what's one thing that Syracuse can do that can really set them over the top and increase their chances tenfold at pulling off the upset?
Yeah, it'll be, Duke, if they have an inability to attack the zone defense properly. And obviously they're going to be well schooled in it. This isn't anything new. I mean, they know what's coming and the staff knows what's coming. But if Syracuse gets out in the passing lanes, which they tend to do in the zone, right? They tend to disrupt things that way, force turnovers again. If Duke gets up there 14, 15, 16 turnovers again, that's going to be a problem. And they have, I mentioned the problem with veteran guards facing Florida State's veterans, Miami's veteran guards, that those teams cause problems for Duke. And, Syracuse has ball handlers that have been in this league for a couple of years now, Gerard, Boeheim, they know what they're doing. So that could be a problem right there. That's a factor I want to watch for sure on Saturday is how Duke handles that. And if they can, that tells me that they could be at their best going forward, because so far this season, when Duke's played their best basketball, they haven't been able to be beaten by anybody. I mean, that's how they played against Gonzaga. That's how they played against Kentucky. Some of these ACC games, when they've been at their best, it's a level other teams in the league can't reach. But if somebody can stop them from getting there, like Syracuse with the zone, that'll be a problem. So this is a big game for Duke to see how they're going to look going forward.
Big game for both sides. And Steve, thank you so much for coming on and giving us more insight into how the Blue Devils are doing it and how the outcome could unfold this weekend. We really appreciate it, and we hope to have you back on soon.
Yeah, very good, guys. It's good to be with you, and thanks a lot.
That's Steve Wiseman. He's the Duke beat writer for the Raleigh News and Observer. That was his time with us, and now we'll talk more about Duke and Syracuse coming up on the Ostrom Avenue podcast.